No, none. All that's BS. No, totally BS. Yep.
Is that
Who said that?
Detainees who told us that.
How would they know me? Okay, think about that. Do you honestly believe that's credible? So this is 2006. I'm a junior officer. Do you honestly think that they would have remembered me from Adam? Of course not.
So that is the impassioned response of Governor Ron DeSantis to a journalist who was confronting him about his time earlier in his career at Guantanamo Bay, where now prisoners who had been at Guantanamo Bay at that point are saying that DeSantis stood by and laughed as they were tortured, forced feedings and those sorts of things. So we actually know a little bit about this. There's been some prior reporting. And once you learn the details, maybe you'll understand why he was so freaked out about the questions that were coming his way. So he did serve as a lawyer at Guantanamo Bay back in 2006. He arrived at Guantanamo in the midst of mass hunger strikes among detainees protesting their treatment at the prison. He arrived as part of a team of military lawyers to help solve the situation. He has talked about this before as well, 5 years ago, saying for these detainees, the jihad was still ongoing and they would wage jihad any way they can. Some of the things they would do hunger strikes. So everything at that time was legal in nature, one way or another. So the commander wants to know, well, how do I combat this? Just briefly stop for, there's nothing I love more than seeing someone trained as a lawyer who's now an executive saying like stuff was legal one way or another. Definitely an ethical approach to life. He says, so one of the jobs of a legal advisor would be like, hey, you actually can force feed. Here's what you can do. Here's kind of the rules of that. Again, very worried about the law. You can do it, kind of, I guess. Look, that's what they were sent to do. They wanted some sort of like plausible deniability, some sort of cover, an excuse to be able to do what they wanted to do, which was force feed these people, torture them in a variety of different ways. And that's what he did. Now, he never explicitly states that he told anyone to force feed any particular prisoner. So he didn't say you can force feed that prisoner, but he is openly admitting years later that he was part of the justification to do that sort of thing. And he actually has said a bit more about his experience there, saying, you also had a lot of detainees claiming abuse because this was in the wake of Abu Ghraib and that was used offensively against our guards. What I learned from that, and I took to Iraq when I was working with SEAL Team 1, is they are using things like detainee abuse offensively against us. It was a tactic, technique, and procedure. Yeah, that was really the most egregious thing about Abu Ghraib, was that it was bad for us. That was really what I learned from that as well. So look, we know who Ron DeSantis is. We know what he saw his role there. Now, we can get into the specific claims that are made about different prisoners. There's 5 prisoners who have talked about seeing him at these sorts of things. Some have said specifically that he was there for their force feedings. As of right now, look, we're never gonna be able to say definitively. Video is not gonna come out, but this is something that has dogged him for some time. The question I wanna ask you guys, and I wanna start with you, David, is does he even need to worry about this? Like if video did come out, or photos, and he's literally like Abu Ghraib, like pointing at the detainees being force fed. It's a Republican primary. Do we think that they would care?
If this was Trump, he would own it. He'd be like, yeah, that's right. I stopped the terrorists. I was there myself. I saved America. While Ron DeSantis runs away from it. So, it's possible Ron DeSantis is thinking more about, mass appeal as opposed to a Republican primary. But we know that if this was Trump, he would absolutely own this. And what I find interesting about DeSantis's response here is that he says, how would they remember me? As if you wouldn't remember the person that helped to torture you? Like, how would that not be seared into your brain? Like, of course they would remember you. And with multiple people saying this, look, obviously we don't know for sure, right? But it's kind of hard to deny when he himself is on the record saying, yeah, I was, he was a part of this. So it's not a stretch to say he was also in the room at the time.
I mean, as I said with JR, I think it's cool just the fact that he's being held to account in a public space at all for this. And my opinion is that now let's do Alberto Gonzalez. Let's do George Bush. Let's do Cheney. Let's do Rumsfeld. Let's do all of these guys that presided over the torture regime. Because, I mean, The Iraq War obviously has forever sullied America's reputation abroad. Not that it was very sterling to begin with. Thank you, CIA. But this torture stuff, this idea that Americans, the foreign policy regime of America, the foreign policy bureaucracy, because it's not even a regime, these people don't lose their freaking jobs. That they've ceded that moral high ground a long time ago. And part of it is this torture stuff. And so if Ron DeSantis is the first guy to ever get a public flogging for their role in the torture at Guantanamo and black sites all over the world, then hey man, I'm with it. Even if nothing comes of it, I'm glad he has to wear this around his neck with public shame and ridicule.
Meanwhile, think about what we give a pass to. Like, Donald Trump massively increased the number of bombings and drone strikes while he was president. Thousands of people died. Plenty of them were bad, sure. Lots of them were civilians. They're dead, not just tortured, dead, wiped out. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Who would even, like, if you went in the media and raised that as a concern, they would look at you like you were a swamp creature, like you were a madman. But with the torture, maybe, I guess, because he was a lawyer. We don't want to start questioning presidents. And if DeSantis becomes president, by the way, the questions will be over. You will not be asking them anymore. But when he was a lawyer, then maybe we can get him on something. It's just so weird, the areas where they could be criticized and the massive areas of great power where they cannot.